Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Colliers structure meeting. And today we will give two general club presentation. And the first is presented by Grasso, and another one will be presented by the Kusano. Okay. So if you are ready, please start your general club presentation. Thank you.
Maybe we have to introduce ourselves, but briefly, each of us.
Okay. 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 So just start from me. So hello everyone, and I'm very new to the this Korea and the cultural studies area, and currently I'm the third year PhD student in Tokyo University, and in this April I will graduate and become a assistant professor in Tokyo University, and yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Next, I will go. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyoko Kusano. I'm a, how to say, PhD candidate student, before PhD student of Nao's lab. My background is neuroscience, especially EEG, and I'm trying to do my PhD in psychology. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So hello everyone. My name is Nam. My nationality is Vietnamese, but I'm living in Japan and have been staying here for 10 years. So I am doing the PhD in Toyohashi University of Technology in Aichi Prefecture. And my background is related to vision science. Nice to meet you.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Moritz. I'm a PhD student at the University of Vienna, but currently I'm at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology for an internship with the Embodied Cognition Unit of Tom Froese, part of the qualia structures. And I'm interested in theories of consciousness in general, kind of like taking a meta-scientific approach to find out where our studies of consciousness science is headed to at the moment. And yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting you all at this place here. This is Oist.
Hi everyone, my name is Matteo Grasso. I have a background in philosophy. I did my PhD in philosophy on metaphysics of consciousness and causation. And then I switched to doing research on computational neuroscience of consciousness, working with Giulio Tononi in Madison, Wisconsin, where I am still working now. And I am visiting for 2 months at ATR to work with now Tsuchiya and his group.
Okay, thank you for introduction. And then it's time to start the general club. Okay, Russell, if you are ready, please start.
If it's no problem, can I do the first?
Oh, okay, sure. And to be noted, the presentation time is 15 minutes, and then we will have a Q&A for 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, let's start the journal club. Today I will present about this paper, Unpacking the Complexity of the Consciousness, Theory and Reflections. This paper is about the summary of 5 consciousness theories and their debates. The debate was held in ASCC 2022, Great Consciousness Debate, and 5 presenters introduced their theories and discussed about what is the coincident agreement among the theories or what is the disagreement, and tried to find how to unify the theories and what's the prevent to do that in current stage. So aimed at updating the academic community on each theory. And this paper is about consisted from the 2 parts. One part is the introduction of each theory, and another part is the debate part. And in this presentation, I will focus on the latter part. Just keep the introduction of each series. The people and theory attended is like that. First is a global neuronal workspace theory by Duhan. And next one is higher order theory, Fleming. And the third one is integrated information theory, Bolly. And the fourth one is recurrent processing theory by Lam. And the last one was not attended in the debate, but later he added his part in discussion, predictive processing by Anioses. The discussion debate part was so many points to discuss, but mainly 5 main discussed point was discussed. First of all, current problem of the theories of consciousness is summarized like this. So there are so many theories which try to explain mechanisms that underlie the consciousness and phenomenal experiences, but there were so many and there is no consensus among them. Also, however, no theory succeeded to explain them for now completely. Also, we haven't succeeded to establish an agreed upon account. And so to overcome this issue, the debate was held. And the first, what we are trying to explain was discussed. The summary is like this. So currently, all TOCs are trying to explain phenomenology of consciousness. This is the biggest point of the consensus among theories, at least 5 theories. But still, not all theories have provided explanations or theory-based empirical investigations of the phenomenal character of an experience. Also, what phenomenology is and what counts as phenomenological data differs among theories. So one theory thinks the phenomenology experience is very rich. It existed all over our perception, but other theory thinks it's very sparse, and it's kind of illusion to think that all of the visual field is rich. And also one more thing was discussed, that the imbalance of studies between state consciousness and content consciousness. So each theory tried to explain both two problem, state consciousness and content consciousness. State consciousness means the difference between the I am conscious or not conscious, like deeply sleeping, or very actively waking. So what's the difference between two states is the state consciousness, and the content consciousness is, maybe I understand, like it's the difference between the attendedness or attention. What makes the difference between I'm conscious on this content, this phenomena, this experience, or unconsciously just process the information. So this is the first part. And secondly, they found that the thing they think what the consciousness is also very different. So the definition of the consciousness is different among the theories. They found that they can't even agree on which state are consciousness and which ones are not. There is 2 examples. One is inattentional blindness. Some theories thinks they're completely conscious, and one is completely inattentional and unconscious. And some things that depends on the context. And also flow state is another example. And they couldn't say how we can access on the flow state and try to explain something. But they talked about the good aspect of this lack of agreement and also bad aspect. So, this is bad aspect, but even this kind of very general definition of the consciousness or what phenomenology is different among theories, it's almost impossible to compare and test them. So they thought that theories should be somewhat commensurable, logically and empirically, to be tested. But also this can be a way to arbitrate between theories because, for example, one theory thinks inattentional blindness is completely unconscious, but we don't know how to do, but somehow we can prove the certain phenomena, inattentional blindness is conscious or unconscious, then it is very strong evidence that this theory is not true or true. And the third one is they talked about TOC's series or not. Dehan said TOC is not a series for now. He thought we should call it as a framework or hypothesis, even the GNWS included, because non-series achieved a level enabling precise formulations, leading to testable predictions that fully explain all aspects of consciousness. And he thought that since all TOCs are partial, this explosion of the proliferation of theory is occurring. So to overcome this situation, we have to define and have a agreement of very general definition of theories and phenomenological experience. But even so, there Lam and Duhan was discussed that there is very big disagreement on general problem. So one more general problem was the lack of critical criteria for what the theory must explain. And Duhan thought that theory should explain perceptual organization because unity and integration is very key or core of the consciousness. But Duhan disagreed about that. He thought the theory don't have to explain perceptual organization. Theory should only explain consciousness perceptual organization. Not all the brains, but only the specific mechanism that single out consciousness and unconscious processing. The fourth debate point was what will you refute the theories? If what evidence was shown, then you will change your mind. And each theory showed possible evidences that can refute themselves. Still, there are so many problems. First, the brain complexity and the data allow for excessive flexibility in data interpretation. And it remains unclear which specific neuronal activities or brain activities should correspond to indices of consciousness in each theory. So this situation allows theories to preserve failing theories by simply adjust sub-assumptions rather than discarding them completely when faced with contradicted data. So theories should provide detailed and explicit explanations of their common principles, and how they translate in the predictions is needed. The last debate point was the philosophical viewpoint, so functionalism versus structuralism. So they discussed about what phenomenology actually is and which system would be enough after all. The GNWT and HOT, it was classified in computational functionalism. They thought implementing consciousness is completely the same that implementing certain computational functions. On the contrary, IIT and structuralism thinks the consciousness is not the problem or the functions, but the structure. So structuralism thinks how the system is built as a structure, and it is a key point to whether the system has a consciousness or not. The last three PP was classified in biological naturalism, and he thought it is kind of general kind of functionalism that the Seth thought consciousness is a high-level emergent process that evolved in the complex, hierarchically organized living systems. So they focused in more what made of the system is. And in summary, so the debate make it clear that so much disagreement than agreement among theories, and so many general problems and viewpoint is not shared in general. For example, what consciousness is, or which states are conscious or which are not, and what is required from a theory of consciousness, not the hypothesis or framework, and also what exactly should be explained. So to unify to make a unified theory of consciousness, it's necessary to make a consensus on these questions in general, very general questions in all scientific community. In that paper, they thought it's important to inter-theoretical dialogue between theory proponents in all scientific community, and an initiative that stems from theory-neutral experts who will lay out the ground for future investigations and for a more informed evaluation of the theories can be important to overcome these situations to make a unified theories for consciousness. So this is a summary of the paper.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. And any questions from our audience?
Yes, if I can go first, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, thank you for that clear and nice presentation of the paper. I read that paper some time ago, and I was now rereading it with this perspective in mind. How far we have moved from like 2022 when the debate was held to now, where we have adversarial collaborations and people like do this theory testing in practice. So I was wondering, like, to all of you, how these like experimental tests, these theory tests, change your perspective on the field. Or if you haven't heard about it, I can give you a quick overview. Because for me, it seems like this 2022 dialogue is kind of saying, oh yeah, we should do these inter-theoretical dialogues and tests. We should have some predictions that can be verified in new experiments and not in old ones, because a lot of these theories, they just like redescribe old like neuroscientific or psychological experimental results. And so my question there is then, did they achieve what they set out in 2022 with these theory tests, or do you think are these still open questions?
For me, I don't know about the recent progress of this series, and I'm really appreciate if you give a quick overview of that kind of things.
Sure. I think it's important to the context of the debate, because there are these adversarial collaborations that, for example, Liat Mudrik was and Lucia Meloni, two authors of the paper, were pushing for, where they test different theories against each other. They make predictions about some set of experiments, and then they have like different labs trying to verify their predictions. And the first one came out, I think, last year, 2025. The first publication it's called Cogitate, where they tested global workspace theory and integrated information theory. And from reading this debate, it sounds like they should have gotten a clear result. Like, what is right, global workspace or IIT? And obviously, it's much more difficult. There were some predictions that, like, both theories were correct, and other predictions where they were both wrong. And overall, the debate is now, what did these tests actually show us? Did they show us that both theories were wrong, that both theories had something right? Or does it show us that the theories are underdeveloped to actually make these predictions that can be tested? I think, yeah, I would be sympathetic to this idea of that you also mentioned, that the theories of consciousness are not fully fledged theories. They're like a bundle of hypotheses.
Thank you a lot.
So may I have some comment? So first of all, thank you for your summary. It's a really long paper, and I think I was spending around more than 2 hours to read this paper. But thanks for your summarizing. And yes, as similar to what Maurice has mentioned before, I feel like this kind of debate, I mean, the debation is not really in the level of the debation. And I feel like all of the theory can support together rather than stand separately and to be a debate or something. So my question is, do you think that can Z theory can support each other, or they should stand separately or something?
Matteo have some comment on this? Thank you for the question. And so yeah, so your question, I understand that your question is, do everyone think the theory can be support each other, not just fighting each other to unify or make a precise explanation about that. And I think we can support each other in some sense, and also we have to try to beat other theories in some sense in the same time. I had some idea when reading this paper about unifying the IIT and GNWT. I'm not expert of GNWT and also IIT, so maybe it's just a very wrong direction idea. But so in general, I understand that GNWT thinks it's a kind of functionalism, and it will try to implement some certain sophisticated functions. And IIT thinks there is not the function, but the structure. And I've imagined that if the functions which needed to have a consciousness will require a certain structure in brain, which will have a high value or something, then we can unify GNWT or IIT together. So I'd like to ask your opinion about that, after your question.
Sure. Yeah, so thanks. My comment is actually related to what you just said, and also what Nam said. So maybe also what Moritz said. So I think since 2022 or even before, what I noticed is that there was a tendency for people to try to categorize theories as, oh, this is a functionalist theory, this is a structuralist theory, this is a, different kind. But in the end, we also saw that there is a convergence, for instance, in some theories like predictive processing. Sometimes they might be categorized as more like functionalist, because you can say, oh, you can implement some sort of like predictive coding in many, many different architectures, definitely substrate neutral, but then also being compatible with biological naturalism. So being like, no, actually, it's not functionalist, or it is not computational functionalism, right? And we also saw a paper by Fleming talking about quality spaces, where basically you can take hot and make it into a structuralist theory. And you could even think about structures of functions, you know. So my feeling is that I don't know the theories are well developed and well characterized enough that actually their claims are mutually exclusive on these kind of like more general philosophical categories. And so that also goes back to your point that people like to think about theories as alternative, but sometimes it's possible, for instance, that one can take, I don't know, the global workspace and say, well, if global workspace is correct, space is so the main complex is in physical terms for IIT, something like that. Like, so you could in principle maybe find some convergence, which goes also back to Nam's points. But to me, it speaks more to the vagueness in a sense, or the fact that the theories are still not very fleshed out and, you know, well defined yet. Yeah. So anyway.
Thank you for your presentation. So let me ask a simple question. I'm not sure how in the consciousness area design the experiment. So I'm wondering, in several pages of the slide, you mentioned sometimes it is unconsciousness and sometimes it's consciousness. So I want to know how they define the consciousness and unconsciousness, and if in the experiment it's always the binary value or there is a value between, yeah, not only binary.
The first about the binary, I think it depends on the theory, but in general, it's not binary, I think. If my understanding is correct, especially, for example, IIT is, they don't have some certain, how to say, certain level to have a consciousness or not consciousness. It's just, you know, there is a phi value represents how the strong the consciousness is, how the level of consciousness is. And this is just, you know, continuous. So there is no, you know, certain level.
Yeah.
If the phi is below 5, then it's not conscious or something. It's not such kind of level kind of thinking. And about the experiment, I think maybe Moritz or Matteo is much more familiar about that. But what I know is if you want to test the consciousness theory by experiment, the good way to do that is like in like the present is divided in the 3 to 3.4. What they first hypothesis something, and if this hypothesis is correct, the experiment should be result should be this one. Then they do the experiment in real, like, you know, making in virtual system, there are some kind of simulation of the neural network, then calculate something like index, like phi or something, or just, you know, using a mouse or fMRI data to computation now experiments to such kind of neuronal activity. Then they can, you know, test the assumption and the prediction is correct in real or not. I'm not sure it's the correct answer to
Yes.
your question, but still.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very perfect explanation. And okay, so maybe it's time for the first presentation and first Q&A. If there's no more question. Okay. Thank you very much and for your presentation, Kusano. And then
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I'll share my screen.
I will just
Oh, perfect. All right. Can you hear my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, this is not about synesthesia, so that's another topic. Okay, so I'm presenting this paper that came out at the end of 2025, the 17th of December by Mudrik and colleagues. And it's on a confusion about there being two types of consciousness. And this actually ties pretty nicely into what we've been talking about, because it's almost as if this paper now tries
The connection is not very stable, right?
look at the debate and why are we still stopping? Can you hear me okay?
Now it's okay. It's just unstable for a little bit.
Okay. Well, let me know if it gets, yeah, let me know. Okay, so the key points of this paper, basically, it starts from the premise that consciousness science is at an impasse, and there are endless debates, both empirical and conceptual, and they do precisely mention the cogitate experiment and the adversarial collaboration also by Olcese, which is the second adversarial collaboration between IIT, predictive processing, and other theories. And there are entrenched theoretical camps, and they mention the IIT concerned letter and the response by Tononi and colleagues. And they basically say, to resolve this impasse, we have to really go back to maybe a misunderstanding about the fact that there is a distinction between two types of consciousness, which are access and phenomenal consciousness. So these two types of consciousness were defined by Ned Block in 1995. And the idea was that phenomenal consciousness is the qualitative, subjective nature of conscious experiences, what it is like to have them, while access consciousness is the availability of information to cognitive systems, so what can be reported, reasoned about, and used for behavior. The proposal of the authors of this paper is that access and phenomenal consciousness should not be considered two types of consciousness, but just two necessary conditions for consciousness. So in a sense, they are not, you can be A conscious or P conscious individually, but you need to have both conditions for a state to be conscious. So they say to be consciously experienced, a given bit of information must be both potentially phenomenal, so structured in such a way that provides distinctive qualities for a first-person perspective, and it should also be accessed, so integrated with other systems, enabling at least a minimal influence on cognition and behavior, the A consciousness condition. And they say if information is processed in a format that is potentially phenomenal, but is cut off from having any possible influence on behavior, it remains unconscious. So there's a clear idea that there is no P consciousness without A consciousness, and also potentially no A consciousness without P consciousness. And they say that this is useful because ideally this can help settle many controversies between what they call cognitive theories, for instance, GNW, which are favoring access consciousness, and what they call sensory theories, for instance, recurrent processing theory and IIT, that favor instead phenomenal consciousness. And then they say it can also settle some controversies about the implications of these theories. So this is a set of implications that they basically say if we accepted P consciousness and A consciousness as two conditions rather than types of consciousness, then we will resolve some controversies about, for instance, theories of consciousness as a whole. So they say most theories are actually considered incomplete precisely because they only focus on either phenomenal consciousness or access consciousness. So the sensory focused theories are basically, they deal only with the content of experience, but they don't really talk about how this affects behavior, how the content of experience is reportable. And so they lack basically an understanding of the access part. Whereas like the cognitive focused theories, for instance, global workspace or high order theory, they talk about the mechanisms for access, like broadcasting or high order representations, but they really don't explain the phenomenal character, right? So they say if we were to consider these as two conditions for consciousness, then we could also design actually better adversarial collaborations. They say the adversarial collaborations were interesting, but not really, maybe they didn't adjudicate between the theories and say this theory is right and this is wrong, because sometimes the idea was that the theories are actually not talking about the same explanandum. Some are talking about access, some are talking about phenomenal experience, and so we can't really design an experiment that tests the hypotheses of both. So this would actually align theories by domain first, and then it would produce better experiments. And I interject with some questions I have here, which are a little critical, and these are points for debate. And one thing that I immediately noticed reading this paper is that it's true that phenomenal and access might co-occur, but conceptually, I'm still not convinced that they should be considered both necessary conditions, because if phenomenal consciousness without access consciousness is possible, then we would state that's still an experience, it's still consciousness. But if there is access without phenomenal consciousness, then why would we call that consciousness, right? So it seems to me that, yeah, maybe they are together, they are sufficient, but I don't think access is necessary, or it's an open question. So they also say that doing this sort of considering both as conditions, necessary conditions, will help clarify the debate on the neural correlates, because right now many theories actually side, so to speak, on where the most important neural correlate of consciousness is, if it is in the front or in posterior areas, precisely because they start from an assumption of what type of consciousness is more important. And so they say, assuming that posterior areas mostly subserve the phenomenal content while anterior ones implement the access, our suggestion implies that instead of saying, is consciousness in the front or in the back, we should say, well, it's both, because we really want the phenomenal content to be accessible, and so both are necessary conditions. So both areas should be considered in the neural correlates. But again, my question is, but what if we can show that there can be phenomenal consciousness without access consciousness, and we can show that there is reason to believe that there is a conscious experience without activation of, for instance, frontal areas that are usually thought to subserve access, then wouldn't this be evidence that these are not both necessary conditions? So other implications are about what theories say on timing of consciousness. So there has been a long debate on whether the early correlates in the range of 100 to 300 milliseconds are really associated with phenomenal content, and the late correlates are associated with the access, which are maybe 300 to 500 millisecond activations after the stimulus. And they basically say, well, again, here, if we accept that both are necessary conditions, then it means that these two sets of data are not mutually exclusive, because the idea is that the fast correlates are the ones that establish the phenomenal character, and then the other ones, the later one, mediate access. And they say it's a bit like in the past, people were thinking that for vision, the trichromatic and the opponent processing idea of the phenomena that would underlie color vision, they were thought to be alternative hypotheses, but then it turned out that actually they're just like different stages of the same process with which color vision happens. The trichromatic stage is kind of like earlier, and then the opponent processing stage is later, and they also have different mechanisms, but they're both necessary. And one question I have here is that, again, well, what about evidence from no report studies? And again, do we really take access as being necessary? I mean, even if it occurs most of the time, what if we can design experiments where the access part is not, it's not even, you know, happening in a sense along the lines of these specific activations? And then another implication they discuss is about the functions of consciousness. It seems like in the debate, a lot of people consider really the function of consciousness related more to what consciousness can do for behavior. And so they say, well, if phenomenal and access are necessary conditions for consciousness, then consciousness clearly has a function, because at least, at the very least, it has the function of reporting something, like the access part provides function to consciousness. But of course, this doesn't necessarily mean that replicating the functions will replicate consciousness. So they take a step back from functionalism in a sense. They say it can turn out to be true, but not necessarily. That's a separate question. And this is also fine, but I was wondering if the function of consciousness only relies on the access condition, then do they really help in defining the functions of phenomenal consciousness? Because it seems like now only one of the two conditions really has a function. So, and then related to function is also the relationship between consciousness and attention. And the idea is that some theories hold attention as being necessary, like GNW, Hot, and attention schema theory. And then some instead say that attention only modulates phenomenal experience afterwards. And they said, well, right now we know actually that the question that was open in the 60s and 70s of whether attention operates at early or later stages of sensory perceptual processing, that has been solved. Actually, we know that attentional effects occur before, during, and after the process that is involved in perceptual organization. And so attention is kind of like widespread. And again, if we want to merge conscious and attention, we can do so by thinking that access and phenomenal consciousness are actually two necessary conditions. So they are intertwined in a way that doesn't doesn't justify having theories that fully focus on attention and others that fully focus on phenomenal character. And then the last implication is about richness. So they say there is a big debate on whether consciousness, especially understood as phenomenal experience, is rich or sparse, and whether phenomenal experience overflows access. And they say, well, if they are both phenomenal and access conscious are both necessary conditions, then phenomenal conscious cannot overflow access, but consciousness can overflow report. So they say access shouldn't be understood as only report. There is a distinction they mention between non-explicit primary reports and explicit meta reports. So the idea is that one can have access to consciousness even without reporting it with language, for instance. And so they say we should actually design experiments that don't focus on the gap between what one says they experience and what one can report. We should actually design experiments that really target access, content, and how it is structured. And the idea is that this is the gold standard because this is a case where we can have phenomenal experience that is introspectable, and its structure can be accessed and it can be probed through introspection, phenomenological, microphenomenological analysis. And they also quote, of course, similarity judgments and also other non-verbal, non-categorical types of report. And also they say we shouldn't focus on the richness of one instance of consciousness, like the shortest possible, like a glance of a picture or a snapshot, but we should instead study how consciousness unfolds in time. And we should study how the richness comes with the process of consciousness through multiple scenes as they alternate each other. So to conclude, I say, I think their idea is interesting. I think they spot a problem, which is after all these talk about conscience, developing theories, adversarial collaboration, we're still stuck. Why is this the case? And so they try at least to say, maybe it's because these phenomenal and access consciousness are not two types of conscious, but two conditions. But I'm afraid I don't understand how, in particular, one can redefine phenomenal consciousness as being a condition for consciousness, precisely because phenomenal consciousness was defined as the fact that there is something it is like to be a conscious being, right? And so I can imagine phenomenal consciousness without access being still consciousness, and not instead access without phenomenal consciousness not being meaningfully conscious as a state. So it's interesting, by the way, that they to do so they redefine basically phenomenal consciousness, the P condition. They define it as information must be both potentially phenomena, but then if they consider something unconscious something potentially phenomenal, and they consider it conscious when it becomes phenomenal, then it means that phenomenal is for consciousness, right? So that's the part that trips me up a little bit. Phenomenal consciousness, but it is also unclear how to redefine access consciousness as necessary without trivializing it, in the sense that if it is, when they say there is overt outer forms of access that is report, but there's always some internal access that you can understand as self-reportability, and that also always occurs when you have a conscious experience of something. Well, then I wonder whether there is ever a case without, in a sense, access, and it is not trivialized. Okay, I'm not going to comment on this, but if we want to look at the figures, this is the main figure from the paper, where they basically take the block phenomenal versus access consciousness depiction on the left, and they propose instead their revised version on the right. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And are there any questions?
So may I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so can you move to the slide about the implication 2?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, in the paper, they also state a question that are P and A independent or dependent. So about the timing here, you said, I mean, the paper state that P and A are not mutually exclusive. So on the first perspective timing, do you think is independent or dependent here?
So this is a good question. I think there is there's a connection between the timing and the attention. So they say that attention can happen before, during, and after the process is involved in perceptual organization. It can happen very early. So you can even have, that you can have priming effects. So even before you actually experience something phenomenally, let's say before accessing or reporting, you can sort of like prime your what you're going to experience through attention. So I think the idea is that, yeah, I think I see a little bit of contrast between these two claims. I was thinking that they would accept that the early correlates are associated with the phenomenal condition, and the late correlates are associated with the access. But if attention can interact at the early on stage, then maybe this is not exactly what they're saying. I don't know if this clarifies your question, but I just bring up a little puzzlement on my side. Yeah.
Yes, I just want to hear your opinion because I also think that it's really hard to uh, like we cannot say that it's independent or dependent because I mean beyond the paper they mentioned that every perception need both P and A, but it depend on the object and the target we want to perceive. The P and A process gonna be like sometimes it depend and each other and sometimes it's independent each other. So that's the reason why we also need attention here. I think so. That's all.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, thank you. If I can go next, I just wanted to say, like, I was also puzzled by similar things about the distinctions that they make, especially like saying that you can like phenomenal consciousness without access is not conscious. It's like, okay, this kind of goes against the whole definition of block, which confused me a lot. And I was wondering what's kind of your takeaway there, because for me it seems like they seem to go beyond this like two-level picture of phenomenal and access consciousness by talking about a third type, which is kind of like you're not only having access to your internal states, but also you can access to report them, which opens up kind of this third layer. One is like I have access to it, and then like I can give access to someone who studies it. So is this to me it seems like it's confusing what we can study about consciousness with what consciousness actually is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't want to be fully dismissed. Like I think I see why the motivation of this paper, and there is a sense in which it's true, like we were saying before, that theories that focus mostly on access and mostly on phenomenal consciousness, they are probably incomplete because we want to say how the two things are tied to each other. But I don't know if having this sort of like ecumenical, like, oh, maybe it's just the same, everything all together is really going to help. I think the danger I believe is actually that by thinking that they are necessary conditions, both of them, then a lot of theories are not going to try to study access independently from consciousness or conscious experience in the sense of phenomenal experience. And one thing that I really believe is that there is another distinction that Kyoko brought up before, which is between, let's say, transitive consciousness and intransitive consciousness, right? Or content conscious, like the fact of being conscious of a stimulus that is perceived above a threshold, compared to being conscious in the first place, like as a being who has an experience. And to me, this idea is that, phenomenal experience usually really points to the question, how are you a system that is conscious in the first place, even if in principle you're not detecting any stimulus, you're not conscious of any content, you're just there. It's in the most contentless state you can imagine. So I think there's a danger in conflating the two things, and there's a danger in making the waters actually even more kind of like muddy.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it goes together with what Ned Block also said. Ned Block himself was defending that there is basically no difference between talking about level and content of consciousness, because like if you have a complex enough process that is conscious, then it has to have content. So a theory needs to describe both. Like if it's a proper theory of consciousness, it cannot like only say something about one or the other.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, just mute myself.
Can I have a question next? I think this is very general question, and maybe I don't have a full understanding of access consciousness. I think I understand and real feeling of the phenomenal consciousness, and so that I agree that I can't imagine that there is a phenomenal, there is not phenomenal, but only access consciousness, what is this state is like. I have never such kind of experience before, so I can't imagine what this is like. But so what I want to ask is, so in this paper, they divide the consciousness into phenomena and access consciousness, and they think this is also very deep, completely divided, or something mutually exclusive, or sometimes not. But this kind of dividing consciousness into these two and is very usual viewpoint of consciousness philosophy, or this is very unique of this paper.
Yeah, thanks. So I think it is a pretty common distinction, and actually maybe they are right in this respect, that the contemporary debate of the past, like 30 years now, has been heavily influenced by this distinction by Bloch. And maybe, so you can argue that actually this distinction is flawed in many ways. Like one way is, like you say, instead of saying maybe that these are two separate kinds of consciousness, one could say it's just like you can't have one without the other, in a sense that that phenomenal experience requires some form of internal availability, and so maybe the two things are not really opposite, and you can't even define them separately as conditions, because you can't have one without the other. But then another way to actually criticize the notion is to say that access consciousness shouldn't be called conscious and your access consciousness, because, and I think their paper is probably motivated by the realization that if we give too much importance to access, then something like AI or artificial machines, well, clearly they do a lot of computational things in terms of that we could call cognition, but we're really not sure that they have any phenomenology going on. So clearly that's a kind of access consciousness, if you want, but we don't think they should be considered conscious, or some people at least are unsure about that. And so I agree with you that if I think about something, a machine that satisfies the access conscious condition, but not the phenomenal conscious condition, what is that? Does it feel like something? Is it consciousness? I wonder. So yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So then, this kind of access consciousness is very functionalistic viewpoint of the consciousness, right? If I understand correct. So, one more question is: do you think the consciousness, the phenomenon of itself of consciousness, can be divided like two, or I don't think it's just a divided, but to project to axis of the function or phenomenon, just lay the shadow into the two axes. So, but do you think it is a very important axis, but there is also another axis, or this is enough to just characterizing consciousness itself?
So I'll say one thing, but I also want to have other people intervene if they want to. I think, so my feeling is that in 1995, maybe the word conscious was used differently. It was maybe used more as like awareness, or like some general, it was a cognitive term, right? It wasn't about experience necessarily, just about cognition in general. And if that's the case, then it kind of makes sense to call access consciousness and phenomenal consciousness as two different kinds of consciousness, because you could say, yeah, you can have access, and you can, so for instance, in blind sight or things like that, you can perform, you have information available to your behavior, even if it doesn't feel like anything. So you can say there is unconscious cognition in a sense, right? That's access consciousness. Maybe that was Bloch's original intention, to call this thing access conscious and the other one phenomenal conscious, because it really feels like something. But I think 30 years later, after the hard problem of conscious debate and a lot of philosophical also debate, I think people now tend to reserve the term consciousness to experience, which really seems to track phenomenal consciousness better. And then the pure access without phenomenal, it seems to me it's more of a performance function, cognitive type of axis. So there are still two axes, maybe. One is about overt behavior and functions, and one is about experience. But I would say that, yeah, consciousness really tracks more like the phenomenal axis. That's my view. I'm curious about everybody else.
Yeah, I totally agree. It seems like the neural correlates of consciousness approach was kind of like the thing in the 90s. So I think Ned Block put this distinction there because the neural correlates of access are very different from like the neural correlates of whatever phenomenology would look like. So I think it's in this kind of sense that also Christo Lega argues that like this distinction is like a degenerating research program, in the sense that we put the phenomenal, the what it is like type of experiences in the middle. Also, when you look at like minimal phenomenal experience research and stuff like that, it's very different from the phenomena that they were talking about in the 90s, where it's like, why do I have this thought? So in this sense, I really agree that the distinction doesn't make much sense in that regard anymore. But I think historically it like keeps the debate on track. That we're not looking for a simple functionalist explanation, but we want to like explain the structure of experiences, of subjective experience. And I'm new to the qualia structures project, so I just saw it from the sidelines a lot. But to me, it seems like something that Johannes Kleiner likes to call the structuralist turn in consciousness science, that we move a little bit away of like, why are some cognitive processes conscious and some are not, to like how can we map the whole structure of experiences, which is much more useful than just having this like on or off type of definition.
Yeah, thank you. And okay, so I think maybe it's time for this two general club of the collier structure. And thank you everyone for everyone's presentation and question.